Hey, what's up? I'm Mike Salemi, and for today's video, I thought we would go into one of the more common mistakes that people make when they're doing the kettlebell swing. For today's swing breakdown, what I thought we would do is focus on the upper body. So specifically the shoulders and the back. Now what I want to do is I'm going to show you a super common error as it relates to shoulder and back positioning. We're going to lay it down with one bell. We're also going to correct it with two bells. So depending where you're at in your lifting, you can make this type of adjustment at any load or any types of bells you're doing. So what it's going to look like, and it can show up typically in 2 or 3 different ways, but it would look something like this. So common error number 1 is where the shoulders protract, so meaning they come forward, and usually what comes along with that is a rounding of the upper back, and oftentimes the head and neck jets forward. Obviously that's not a position that we want to be in. The bell's pulling us off of our base, and we don't really have good structural alignment, boom, when we hit the top of the swing. What it should look like correctly is this. So at the top of the swing, if you're looking at me from the side, it should almost be like a deadlift. I should be nice and straight, ears over the center of the shoulder, center of the hip, the knee and the ankle, and my body and my core is nice and engaged. So the first way that you want to think about correcting those rounded shoulders, if it's not just like an awareness issue, if it's not just a cue in terms of staying straight or bring your chest open, for example, is to actually pull your shoulder blades back a little bit. So retract your shoulder blades. So the way you can do that when you're doing the swing, when it comes up, if you have the ability, you can, and the flexibility to keep your arms straight, you can certainly do that. One thing that I love doing, and also it really helps larger lifters, especially lifters with like wider shoulders, you got to think about this. The kettlebell handle, when you're doing a two-handed swing, is pretty narrow. So imagine if I had really wide shoulders and I try and grab a narrow handle, just by the orientation of grabbing something small in the center line or in the center with wide shoulders, it's going to encourage this rounding of the back. So the way you can kind of get around that is I actually will soften my elbows a little bit just because they'll help me readjust my shoulder and my back position. So let me show you what that type of swing looks like with softer elbows as the kettlebell floats up. So on that type of swing, my arms were fully straight when the kettlebell was behind the body. And then after I hit the acceleration phase, once my arms kind of drifted away from my hips, then what I did is soften my elbows down, I pulled my shoulder blades back, and I started really activating my lat. That kept me in a good position. Once again, I really don't care if your arms are straight or slightly bent. What I do care is how is it reflected in your shoulder and back position. So play with each one, see which one feels good for you. And then the second big question that I often get on the swing is, for those people that do have that shoulder blade nice and plugged in, or those shoulders plugged in, how much should they be squeezing together? It's about you playing with the movement, laying down your reps, and really feeling how much engagement is optimal for you. So I'm not going to be swinging up where I'm squeezing super tight. I'm just going to try and be as relaxed as possible and as explosive as possible, and just trying to hit a nice position here. So play with it. Again, common error number 1 is shooting it out here. And then sometimes people will pull back too much. If we're to take this now with 2 bells, so 1 bell is certainly simpler, right? You're dealing with 1 object. Now we've got 2. The load's going to be heavier. You got to manage 2 weights, 1 in each arm. It's going to add complexity to the movement. But let me just say this. You remember earlier how I shared, if you're especially a wider lifter and you have a narrow handle, it's just by the nature of gripping something close in the center, you might want to round. With 2 bells, now you can broaden up a little bit. So sometimes doing a single arm swing or 2 bells can just be a little bit easier to set those shoulders. So let's go ahead and lay it down correctly with what it would look like with 2 bells. So that's the double kettlebell swing. keeping the shoulders engaged, keeping my back in a good position. I was integrating the lats, and I like, once again, those elbows nice and soft. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, dialing in one of the more common swing errors. Drill it, see what this one error, really addressing it, focusing in it for a whole training session. Lay down maybe 10 sets of 10 swings and take 30 seconds to a minute rest, but just focus on one technical element. So much of what happens in my head when I'm approaching training, as opposed to trying to focus on 50 things in a session, I'll pick one thing for the entirety of that session or even series of session, and that's the only thing that I'm trying to drill in. So if you're experiencing this error, all I want you to do for an entire session or even a week or 2 weeks is just focus on that one technical element. If you can lay that down, then once you progress into movements like cleans or snatches, you're gonna be way more dialed in, as well as once you start lifting heavier loads, because you wanna make sure that your technique transfers moving forward. And the only way you can do that is building in volume intentionally. So I hope you enjoyed today's video on fixing one of the more common errors on the swing. I'll catch you guys next time.
Take it.